Hey guys, so yesterday I saw Doctor Strange and the WandaVision, or the Doctor Strange and the um um Wandaverse. No. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Um I've been trying to get that name right all morning in preparation for this. It's Doctor Strange 2 and the Multiverse of Madness yesterday, and I decided I would make a little bit of a what do you call it? An informal review for that movie, which is going to be a little bit different for me. Normally, I upload stuff on this channel that's much more long form than this, but today we're going to do something a little bit more short form and see how that goes. Um, See if we can. Anyway, so saw that yesterday. I know it's not the most recent movie ever, but I saw it and I decided, why not dive into that? So, um, first things first, I guess. Should I give my sort of score for the movie? No, I should probably save that for the end, or closer to the end. I would say, uh, well, maybe I'll say it was decent. It was a decent movie. I actually think it's a good time, particularly if it's something that you go and see with friends and then sort of joke about afterwards. It's a very creative movie. Um, if you're one of the three people that hasn't seen it yet, it's a very creative movie. Like that is the number one word that I could use to describe what I just saw. Sorry for bumping you. Uh, is just like unfettered creativity, almost to the movie's detriment, sort of at times. And this is a little bit of a weird. It's whenever you get somebody who is as well known as Sam Raimi to do a movie in uh, any kind of sort of blockbuster type movie, you really in the year 2021, you really it can blindside you, sort of the vision that some of these people have, some of these directors have, that can really stand out for you if you're not used to that. Um, and for many people, it's going to clash. Like anytime you have a big name director who has their own singular style, and they can kind of control that style to an extent with the movie that is being released. It's going to clash for some people. The style is going to clash for some people, because you don't get to that big name status without having something about you that feels different and feels bold, for the most part. Um, you tend to not know there are many very successful directors who don't have very interesting styles, but you tend to not know their names. They do very, very well, but you tend to not know their names quite as much. So when you come into a movie like this, just know that you're going to be seeing the name Sam Raimi should be floating in the back of your mind. And this movie does not feel like Spider-Man. If you're going into this movie hoping that it's going to feel like Spider-Man, this movie does not feel like Spider-Man. So curb your expectations there. Doesn't feel like Spider-Man at all. In fact, it's really unlike anything I've quite ever seen before, which is a breath of fresh air for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I haven't seen all of the most recent ones, um, for the main reason of just me getting not getting kind of sick of it, getting kind of tired of it. Um, and that's okay. I don't hate Marvel. I just, getting a little sick of it. I decided to watch this one just kind of on a whim because I was bored and I, felt like I needed something to do to just kind of fill space and time for me. Uh, and so I watched uh, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The first thing that you'll notice about this movie is that it starts off with some of the quickest pacing that you'll see in maybe any Marvel film, um, to the point where it feels a little off. It feels a little strange. Um, and I was trying to put my finger on exactly what it was that felt like it feels like something is missing for sure in that like first like third of the movie. It feels like something is missing. And maybe it's just because it doesn't strictly follow a 3 act structure. I wasn't paying close enough attention to know that. But sorry I'm sniffing so much, by the way. I literally just started when I came in here, so I wasn't expecting that. Um, I'm not sure if it follows a 3 act structure very strictly, and that combined with just really quick pacing, you really feel like something is missing. Like something feels weirdly off, but at the same time, it was sort of a little bit of a reprieve, um, because I'm so used to big blockbuster movies and especially Marvel type movies who have this formulaic nature, sort of um, expecting like a really drawn out first act of the movie where they go through and they introduce all the characters and they introduce all the themes and they do it at this kind of sometimes a snail's pace, which oftentimes can feel. I mean, my favorite part of Avengers Endgame was the first act, so it's not all bad, but it's usually with a Marvel movie the first act, or at least in Avengers Endgame, uh, they really lay things down really well and it's really structured and the pacing is slower but still good, and then towards the end it just kind of goes as they start to throw like more and more CGI action at you. You feel like you lose a lot of what you had at the beginning third of the movie by the time you get to the last third of the movie. Um, but this one was exactly the opposite. There's a lot of CGI being thrown at you, this whole movie. But by the way, it looks very good. It looks very good. There's a lot of eye candy to latch on to in Doctor Strange too. Uh, Not just pretty things, but also like different things, creative things, and so that's really where the movie is its strongest, is in just like the amount of creative imagery that you see. It's not necessarily the most creative imagery you've ever seen, but there's just like so much of it that's sort of thrown at you at a very, I think it's well paced in that way that you feel like, oh, wow, like I've never quite, you've never seen this Marvel movie. Um, but that being said, the first third or so is, even with the quick pacing, is not the best part of the movie. If you can get through that first third, the rest of the movie is going to be more interesting, because they sort of go through. I'm not going to spoil it or anything like that, at least not right away. Um, they go through these sort of plot developments that feel very rushed. The first third feels really rushed, and they're just like, okay, there's America Chavez, and Doctor Strange is taking care of America Chavez, and there's no relationship there of any kind at all. There's no bond. Um, and they just kind of rush through all of that. In fact, there's not a lot of character moments in this movie that I can remember. At least not a part of Doctor Strange himself seems to get the most character. Him and Wanda both uh, get the most get the most character moments in this. Um, and I guess I probably have to get into spoilers, don't I? Because okay, spoiler territory. If you haven't seen it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, um, like I said, decent movie. Give it a shot. If you're a fan of Marvel and if you're a fan of Doctor Strange, you'll probably like it. I think. If you're a fan of Wanda, you'll probably like it. Um, so give it a shot. And I'm gonna go into the spoilers now. So the it's difficult to talk about this movie from a non-spoiler standpoint because the main villain of this movie is Wanda, and I feel like most people probably know that by now, but I still, want to be careful. And she becomes the villain in the movie basically from the moment that she arrives on screen, um, which feels a little interesting. She wants to get back to her family or to her kids that don't exist in this universe, but she wants to get to another universe where her kids do exist and I guess kill off that other universe's version of her and then take her place, which is really dark. Which is really dark in the fact that, some people were complaining that it's a little too quick, it's a little too fast. Um, I can kind of see that. Personally, that didn't bother me, mainly because I wasn't. I'm not that attached to these MCU characters anymore. I'm not sure if I ever really was, and so for them to go through like a really rapid character development and character change didn't really bother me that much, and it seemed to be very much in service of the kind of plot that they were going for. So that wasn't a big deal in my personal experience. That wasn't a big deal, although that has been a big deal for some. Um, and she immediately starts off going to the Camertage or whatever it's called, where Wong is and Doctor Strange trained in the first movie. She goes there and just starts wrecking fools, which was kind of a cool scene. It was more, it was a kind of cool scene. It was more interesting than your typical sort of Marvel fight, um, where there's just like tons of CGI and people are just like throwing chunks of debris at each other and that sort of thing. Um, so that was good. The fact that I've actually felt like it felt like there was a narrative through line that was being told, as opposed to just like I really hate it in Marvel when like the entire last third of the movie is just like CGI characters fighting each other. It's so boring when it's two CGI characters that have like similar powers and similar levels of strength, and you can't tell who's winning at any point in the fight. It's so boring, and they've been doing it for like 13 years or whatever. 14 years actually, 14 years. And it was boring when they did it in Iron Man, and it's still boring now. And I can't believe that when they fought Thanos, that was cool. But anyway, sorry, I'm really sorry for sniffing. This didn't feel like that. This felt very unique, and the fact that there were these like creepy, disturbing like horror elements that are brought in, when Wanda like comes through the gong, and it's like very obviously an homage to The Ring. She comes through like a reflection because she can do that. That was awesome. I was like, wow, okay. Apparently, my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, watched Dr. WandaVision, and were like, we can't do this. They actually stopped watching. Mainly my sister decided to stop watching, and that was the moment where I was like, was that when it happened, or was it later? Because there was some other stuff that happened later. I was like, was that when it happened? Was it when she comes out of the gong? Because like I thought that was cool. I didn't think it was scary. I did not think this movie was scary. Some people do though. Um, I guess it depends on how much like horror that you've seen. If you haven't ever watched a horror movie in your life, this will probably terrify you. But if you've seen some horror, it'll be okay. And if you've seen a lot of horror, you won't even feel it. Because from my perspective, I didn't feel it. I didn't even feel it. I mean, at least not in a negative way. I thought I was like, oh, that's interesting. Was kind of what it was happening for me more so. It's like, oh, that was more grisly than I was expecting for a Marvel movie. And after that first third, which is kind of a weak first third, because it just gets through really quickly, and not a lot of really genuinely interesting stuff happens, which explains why the pacing was so quick. They were like, well, we got to get to the good stuff, so let's cut all this out. And you can really feel that, but it's a breath of fresh air for the most part. You start to get to these points where Wanda is chasing them through the multiverse and is just kind of wrecking house and like wrecking human beings in the process. There was a lot of, even before that, there were these character moments with Doctor Strange where it was really interesting how they were like, Doctor Strange, are you happy? That was a through line. That was a thematic through line in this movie was, are you happy, Doctor Strange? And at the end they give like kind of a wishy-washy answer, which I thought was, and they play it for comedy, which I thought was kind of fun, but also like a little unsatisfying. But what do you expect from "Are you happy"? um, they left it in sort of a realistic place, I guess, for the character at least. And but that was a through line, and his relationship with Christine, who is Rachel McAdams, uh, is not resolved in the movie, which was fine. Um, but it was a thematic through line in the movie, which I did appreciate that they kind of gave him. They gave him a love interest, but it wasn't just um, a love interest so that they can get together at the end. It was sort of something to kind of challenge him internally throughout the movie, even though I can't really remember what he learned. I don't remember what he learned. I think face your fears was what he learned. I remember that now. Face your fears was what he learned. Um, he had to face his fears in order to get with Christine. Um, it's always interesting, by the way. I don't want to digress too much because I've already been talking for 19 minutes. This was supposed to be short. Um, it's interesting when like these movies have those kinds of plots that revolve around people who are clearly pushing 40. And Benedict Cumberbatch is like 45. I don't know how old Rachel McAdams is. They both look phenomenal for their age. But Rachel McAdams is a little younger than him. But I think. But you can really when you look at him, you're like, this is a strange plot for someone who's that old. You usually think that like somebody is a little bit more settled down. I mean, maybe not exactly, but like, it's funny that it's like, I want to be with you. I can't be happy unless I'm with you, and it's like 40-year-old people, who are like, will they, won't they? I can't date you because I'm scared. It's funny from that perspective. Although it's kind of, I mean, that does happen to people, I think. Um, it's just a little, this whole movie is, the tone of this whole movie is a little silly. You probably saw it. So, like, the tone of the whole movie is a little silly. And I kind of appreciated that. Like, I didn't want to watch something that was super dark. I mean, there were moments that were definitely dark, like when he meets his alter ego, and his alter ego is like, yeah, I'm depressed, you're depressed, all of our universes, we're all depressed in different ways, so I just started killing them all as a mercy. That was dark. That was dark as hell. And I was like, okay, interesting that they put that in there. Um, and a little unnerving. But the best part of this movie is basically the horror stuff. There's grisly stuff in this movie. If you're thinking about sending, if you're thinking about going and watching this movie with your kids, maybe don't. Maybe don't. This is a PG-13 movie, and I know PG-13 movies have been really weak as far as the rating goes in the past, like pretty much 10 years maybe. PG-13 movies have been nothing. They've been really sanitized and clean, and really virtually no different from a PG movie for the most part, at least from my perspective. Um, this movie's not one of those. It uses its PG-13 rating almost to the point where, like, I mean, my adult sister had to stop watching. She's like 33, and she had to stop watching um, because it was too much. And there's not blood in the movie. There's simulated blood in the movie. Um, she gets covered in something that looks like blood at one point, and after a couple seconds, you kind of forget that it's not blood because it looks like blood. You forget that it's not blood, so it just feels like she has blood on her, basically throughout like a large chunk of the movie. I will say that particular portion of the movie felt like a little bit of a digression, even though um, the how do I describe it? The universe that they go to with the Illuminati felt like a little bit of a digression, and I know that some comic fans didn't like that one particularly. As someone who's not a fan of the comics, I thought it was fine. Sir Patrick Stewart shows up, which was like, whoa, okay. Um, Especially since he was next to John Krasinski and Chihuahua. That moment, I thought to myself, is this a TV show? Like, when we were watching, when I was watching, um, there was Chiwetel Ejiofor, and then there was some other people that I didn't recognize, and then there was Haley Atwell, and there was John Krasinski. All of a sudden, I was like, it took me out of the experience a little bit because I did get the distinct feeling that I was watching like one of those CW shows all of a sudden. Like at that moment, all of a sudden it just felt like I was watching a CW show, even though Chiwetel Ejiofor is not exactly a TV actor, and both Haley Atwell and John Krasinski have been in movies. They are movie stars, technically, but I just felt like I don't I for some reason, especially with Chiwetel Ejiofor there, I was like, this is a TV show all of a sudden. Like, this doesn't feel like a movie anymore. So that took me out of the experience a little bit. Those people all died horribly very soon after that, though, which really, in my opinion, I forgave the movie at that point when all of that stuff happened. I'm really excited whenever a Marvel movie actually shows balls, and this one showed balls to the point that a lot of people are going to be very turned off by it because of the balls. It's not super ballsy, but there's balls in this one, and I thought it was surprising when they chopped off Thanos' head in Endgame. I thought that was pretty surprising. This one goes a little further than that, to the point where, yeah, I was surprised that that Sam Raimi was allowed to do some of the things that he did in this movie. I was surprised he was allowed to do that. There's some freaky stuff in here. Um, yeah, there's one moment in particular that when you see it, you're gonna be like, oh, that's what he's talking about. Um, but anyway, when they got to that point in the movie, that really felt like a TV show for a while. Even though Benedict Cumberbatch was there, when he was on screen, it felt more like a movie. But when someone else was on screen, it felt like I'm watching one of those CW shows. It felt like I was watching The Arrow or The Flash, which was a weird feeling. But at that point, after that point, they did leave that place and went somewhere else. And there's a number of really cheesy moments in this, and I don't mean like it doesn't feel super self-aware, even though I'm sure that it was to an extent because it's Sam Raimi. From what I understand, I've only seen the Spider-Man movies. I haven't seen the Evil Dead movies or any of the other stuff that he's done. But from what I understand, that's kind of where he lives. There's some corny moments in this, to the point where I was like, really? That's who Sam Raimi is? I didn't know that's who he was. I didn't know that's the kind of stuff he made. Um, and it was a little bit difficult to understand why someone would do that. Some line deliveries, uh, where people are like, I will be unreasonable. Like it's really, some of that stuff is really, even though I think that Elizabeth Olsen did a very good job, there are definitely moments like that where I felt a little sorry for her because I felt like maybe if it had been a different movie that she could have really came through. A lot of people are really praising her performance in the movie, and I understand why. I think she did a very good job. I don't quite think it is as good as people are saying. I would say it was more of in the very great or very good category and less in the great category. She's very convincing, but it feels like the emotional moments do feel a little rushed in a lot of the places, except for like the very end. The very end has like a little bit more like real. You actually have time to sort of marinate in some of those emotions a little bit more at the very end of the movie. But as the movie sort of goes through its first and second and really most of the third act, she doesn't really get time to shine that much, apart from just being creepy. She's creepy as hell in this movie, and it works. She does that horror movie girl, woman, The Ring type person pretty well, even though she's wearing like mom pants in a lot of it. It works. It still works. There's a lot of imagery. There's a lot of creative imagery. There's a lot of like creative transitions between things. Some of them are a little distracting. There's a lot of directorial choices in this that are definitely distracting. If you can sort of suspend that judgment, you'll enjoy the movie a lot more. And there's a lot of cheese. There's a lot of cheese. And at the end of the movie, there's not much of like a really satisfying resolution. This is not a Spider-Man 2. This is not even really a Spider-Man 3. This is more of just like a CGI creative romp through some multiverse stuff. It's not as heavy on the multiverse aspects as some people wanted, but I felt like that part was satisfying. Visually, it was satisfying. Um, as far as like character and character development and emotions, not so much. Um, there are moments in there where you do feel some character moments and some emotions, but it's not like a super cathartic movie. Um, it does kind of leave you feeling a little bit empty when it comes to that part, but not every movie has to do that. Uh, and the main strength of this one is that it's visually very creative, and so like I look forward to seeing clips of this movie again in the future. Not the whole movie, but just like random clips I look forward to seeing in the future because of just how creative and quite frankly bonkers some of the things are that happen in this one. It gets like right to bonkers level and then it kind of stops. Like it goes to full bonkers. It doesn't quite go past bonkers to like bananas. But it stays comfortably at bonkers, and then that's where the movie ends. Is in that territory. Um, so it was a decent time. You know, if you go see it with your friends, it's going to be a more fun time. Um, as far as like I actually don't really know how I feel about the movie apart from that. Um, I think that's about it. So, hope I didn't miss anything. I feel like I could have missed something, but all right. Let me know if you want to see more of these. If you thought this was cool, go watch WandaVerse Vision.